The morning I decided to stop being invisible, I was standing in my own kitchen, holding a cup of coffee I had made myself, listening to my daughter-in-law tell me that I needed to scale back. Those were her exact words. Scale back. I remember the way she said it. Not unkindly, which almost made it worse. She had this tone she used sometimes, the one that sounded like patience, but felt like pity. She was sitting at my table, in my house, drinking the coffee I had brewed, and she was explaining to me, carefully and slowly, that my lifestyle was making things difficult for everyone. I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at her over the rim of my mug and thought about the automatic payment I had set up 3 years ago for the lease on the car she had driven here. The car that was parked in my driveway right now. I thought about that, and I didn't say a word. My name is Carol. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a pediatric nurse, raised 2 children mostly on my own after my husband passed, and when I finally retired, I thought the hardest part of my life was behind me. I had a house that was paid off. I had savings. I had my health, more or less. I had my garden and my book club and my neighbor Ruth Ann, who brought me tomatoes from her yard every August without fail. I thought I had done everything right. What I didn't realize, what took me far too long to understand, was that somewhere along the way, I had quietly become something else to the people I loved most. I had become a resource, a line item, a very convenient arrangement. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part that's hardest to explain, because people always want to know why you didn't see it sooner, why you didn't stop it before it got as far as it did. And the honest answer is that love is a slow fog. It settles in so gradually that you don't notice how little you can see until you're already lost in it. My son is named Marcus. He's 41, strong-willed, the kind of man who fills up a room when he walks in. Not because he's loud, but because he carries himself like someone who has never once doubted that the room was already his. I used to think that was confidence. I admired it in him when he was young. He got it from his father, I told myself. His father had that same quality. Marcus married my daughter-in-law, Diane, 14 years ago. I remember liking her at first. She was sharp and funny, and she looked at my son like he was the most interesting person she had ever met. I thought they were well matched. I still think they probably are, in ways that have nothing to do with me. The asking started small. It always does. Marcus called me 2 months after the wedding to say they were having a little trouble covering a security deposit on their first apartment together. Could I help just this once? Of course I could. I was his mother. That's what mothers do. Then it was a car payment, just for a few months while he was between jobs. Then it was Diane's student loans, because the interest was killing them. Then it was the down payment on their house, because the market was moving fast and they couldn't wait. And I had the money sitting there anyway, didn't I? I did. So I gave it. I want to be clear about something. I was never blind to what was happening. I want to say that because I think sometimes people assume that women like me, older women, mothers, women who give and give, must not know what they're doing, must be confused or manipulated into it. And maybe some of us are. But I knew. I saw it clearly enough. Even through the fog of love, I just kept believing every single time that this would be the last time, that they were almost on their feet, that the next call would be just a regular call, a Sunday afternoon call, the kind where nobody needs anything and we just talk. Those calls never came. By the time I sat down one afternoon with a legal pad and actually wrote it all out, every automatic payment, every standing transfer, every subscription, and bill and monthly arrangement I had quietly taken on over the years. I counted 22 separate obligations, not 118, 22. But let me tell you something about 22. 22, when you write them out in a column, when you see them all at once in your own handwriting on a yellow legal pad, is a number that can take your breath away. Marcus and Diane's mortgage top-up because they had bought more house than they could quite afford. The lease on Diane's car, Marcus's truck payment, their gym memberships, both of them, the streaming services, the premium cable package, the landscaping service for a yard I had never even seen because I had not been invited to their home in over 2 years, 2 of their credit cards on which I was a silent cosigner, their daughter's private school tuition, and I want to say something about my granddaughter, Lily, because she matters more than anything else in this story, and I'll come back to her. A storage unit, roadside assistance for both vehicles, and on, down the page, until I reached the bottom and sat quietly for a long time in my kitchen with the legal pad in my lap and the afternoon light coming in sideways through the window. I had been paying for their life, and they had told me at various points over the years that I had no idea how hard things were. The conversation with Diane happened on a Thursday. She had stopped by, without calling first, which had become the habit, to pick up a casserole I had made for them. I made food for them regularly. It was one of the ways I stayed connected, since visits to their home were rare and invitations to family events had grown sporadic. Last Thanksgiving, I had been told, 2 days before, that they were keeping it small this year. I ate Thanksgiving dinner with Ruth Ann and her husband and tried not to let it hollow me out. So Diane was there for the casserole, and somehow we ended up sitting at the kitchen table, and she started telling me about how stressed they were, how stretched, how much pressure Marcus was under at work, and I listened. I am very good at listening. 31 years as a nurse will do that to you. And then she said it. She said that she and Marcus had been talking, and they thought that maybe I should consider scaling back a little. My lifestyle. The house was too big for one person, she said. The upkeep, the utilities. Didn't it make more sense to downsize? There were some very nice senior communities not far from here. Very comfortable, very manageable. She meant well, I think. Or she had convinced herself she did. But what she was actually saying, what I heard underneath the careful, patient voice, was this: your comfort is an inconvenience to us. I was too comfortable in my paid-off house, in my life that I had worked for, with my garden and my books and my coffee in the morning. I was taking up too much space, and the money that I might free up by scaling back, by selling the house and moving somewhere smaller and cheaper, would presumably flow somewhere. I didn't have to ask where. After she left, I sat for a long time. I thought about a moment from the previous spring. Lily had been here, spending the afternoon with me. One of those rare, easy afternoons that I hoarded like treasure. She was 16 then, and she would sometimes come on her own, take the bus across town, show up at my door with her backpack and her earbuds, and that particular teenage energy that is exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. We had baked cookies that day. We had talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. Her friends, a book she was reading, what she thought she might want to study someday. At one point, she had looked at me across the counter, flour on her hands, and said, "Grandma Carol, do you ever feel like people don't actually see you?" I had laughed a little and said, "Sometimes, sweetheart." She had nodded seriously. "I see you," she said. I just want you to know that. I thought about that afternoon for a long time after Diane left. I also thought about what Marcus had said to me 6 months earlier when I had gently, very gently, mentioned that I was feeling a little disconnected from the family, that I missed seeing them more often. He had sighed the way people sigh when they are too tired to be kind, and he said, "Mom, you have to understand that we're at a different stage of life than you. We have a lot going on. You have more time than we do. That's just the reality. More time than we do." I had worked every holiday for a decade so younger nurses could be home with their children. I had raised him and his sister while managing night shifts and grief and a house that needed more repairs than I could afford. I had given him more than I had sometimes had to give, and I had more time than he did. I did not sleep well that week. I turned things over in my mind the way you do when something has finally broken loose and you can't stop looking at it. I thought about the times I had made excuses for them, to myself and to others. I thought about the calls I had waited for that never came unless something was needed. I thought about Christmas 2 years ago, when I had driven 40 minutes in the snow to bring gifts for Lily and been kept on the front porch for most of the visit because they had other guests inside, and it wasn't a good time. And I thought about the legal pad with 22 items in my own handwriting. Here's the thing about realizing you've been funding your own erasure. It doesn't make you angry right away. Or at least, it didn't make me angry. What it made me first was very, very tired. The kind of tired that goes past the body and settles somewhere deeper. The kind of tired that comes from holding something heavy for so long that you've forgotten you're holding it. And then you put it down, and you feel the absence of it in your arms. I called my attorney on a Monday morning. Her name is Patricia, and I've known her for 15 years. And she is one of those people who listens without filling the silence. I explained everything. The 22 items, Diane's visit, the legal pad. She listened, and then she said, "Carol, what do you want to do?" I told her I had 2 things I wanted to do. The first was to change my will. I had left everything to Marcus and his sister, Vanessa, equally. Vanessa lives in Oregon and has made her own life and has never asked me for anything, which I appreciate more than she knows. But I wanted to set something aside, specifically for Lily, a trust, protected, that would be available to her for education and only education until she was 25, and then fully hers. I wanted to make sure that whatever happened between me and Marcus, Lily would know that I had thought of her, that I had seen her too. Patricia helped me set it up. We finalized it on a Wednesday afternoon, and I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. The second thing I did was sit with my list of 22 obligations and go through them one by one. I did not cut them off all at once. I want to say that clearly because I've thought about this a lot, and I didn't want to be cruel. I am not a cruel person. I spent 31 years keeping children alive and comfortable, and I take that seriously in ways that don't turn off when you retire. So I wrote them a letter, a real letter, printed on paper, mailed with a stamp. I wrote that I had been reflecting on my finances and my retirement needs, and that I would be making adjustments to my monthly expenses over the next 60 days. I was not angry in the letter. I was not accusatory. I simply stated what was true. I needed to restructure my obligations, and I wanted to give them time to make their own arrangements. 60 days. That was more than fair. I mailed it on a Thursday. Marcus called on Saturday, not to ask how I was doing, not to say he understood, He called because Diane had checked one of the credit cards that morning and seen the letter referenced in an email notification, and he wanted to know what was going on. I told him what was going on, calmly. I said I was making adjustments to my monthly expenses. He said, "Mom, you can't just do this. We depend on those." I had been rehearsing for this moment for weeks without knowing it. I said, "I know you do. That's been on my mind." He said, "This is going to create serious problems for us." And I said, "Marcus, I love you, but I've been creating solutions for your problems for a very long time, and I need to take care of myself now. You have 60 days, and I believe in you." He hung up. Diane called an hour later. She was less calm than Marcus. She said I was being selfish. She said I was punishing them for one conversation. She said she couldn't believe I would do this to my own grandchild. That last one landed differently than she meant it to, because I had already taken care of Lily. Lily was the one person in that household I was certain I would never abandon. I said, "Lily is taken care of. She will always be taken care of." Diane didn't know what to do with that. There was a long pause. Then she said, "What does that mean?" I said, "It means I love my granddaughter, and she knows it." 3 more calls came that week. One from Marcus, one from Diane, and one, which surprised me, from Marcus's friend Kevin, who apparently had been told some version of events and felt moved to weigh in on a situation that had nothing to do with him. I let that one go to voicemail. After the 3rd call from Marcus in 4 days, I remembered something a friend had told me years ago. In most states, repeated unwanted calls with the intent to pressure someone can constitute a form of harassment. I mentioned this to Marcus the next time he called, gently but clearly. The calls slowed down considerably after that. The 60 days passed. It was not a peaceful 60 days. There were 2 visits to my home, both unannounced, both tense. During the second one, Marcus sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Diane had told me to scale back, and told me that I was tearing the family apart. I poured him a cup of coffee. I sat down across from him, and I said something I had been carrying around for years without knowing quite how to say it. I said, "Marcus, I don't want to tear anything apart, but I have to ask you something honestly, and I need you to really hear it. When was the last time you called me just to talk? Not because something had come up, not because a payment was late or a bill had changed, just to talk, just to ask how I was." He didn't answer right away. He looked at his coffee. I said, "I'm not angry. I'm just tired of being invisible to the people I love." Something moved across his face then. Something I recognized from when he was a little boy, and he had done something he knew was wrong, and he hadn't yet decided whether to admit it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Mom, I didn't realize." I said, "I know, and I meant it." I think on some level, he genuinely hadn't tallied it up the way I had. I think convenience can become comfortable so gradually that you stop seeing it as something taken and start seeing it as just the way things are. I don't believe Marcus is a bad person. I believe he is someone who got very comfortable. And comfort can make you careless. But understanding it doesn't mean absorbing it forever. The automatic payments ended on schedule. 60 days, as promised. Marcus and Diane had made some adjustments by then. Not all of them, I suspect, were comfortable adjustments. But they made them. They are adults. They have jobs. They managed. Lily came to see me 3 weeks after everything had settled. She took the bus, the same way she always did, and she showed up at my door on a Saturday morning with her backpack and her earbuds and a slightly worried look on her face. She said, "Grandma Carol, are you okay? Dad's been really stressed." I brought her inside. I made us both tea, and I told her, in the way you can tell a 16-year-old the truth, which is honestly and without too much detail, that I had made some decisions about my own life that were right for me, and that her father was adjusting, and that everyone was going to be fine. She nodded slowly. Then she said, "Did you do what you needed to do?" I said, "I did." She said, "Good." And then she pulled out her homework and asked if she could work at my kitchen table. And I said, of course. And we spent the afternoon together in the comfortable quiet of people who genuinely like each other's company. I thought about the afternoon we had baked cookies. I thought about what she had said. "I see you. This is what I know now, at 67. After 31 years of nursing and decades of motherhood, and one very clarifying Thursday afternoon with a cup of coffee and a daughter-in-law explaining my comfort to me. Generosity is not a contract. Love is not a subscription service. And taking care of yourself is not the same as abandoning the people you love. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for yourself and eventually for them is stop making it so easy to overlook you. The will is filed. The trust for Lily is set. My 22 items are down to 3, all of which are things I chose to keep because they felt like love and not habit. Marcus called me last Sunday. Not about a bill, not about a payment. He called to tell me he had been thinking and that he knew things had gotten off track somewhere and that he was sorry. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say it's about time. I just said, "I'm glad you called. How are you?" We talked for 40 minutes. It was the longest conversation we'd had in years that didn't involve money. I made myself a cup of coffee afterward and sat in my kitchen in my house that is just the right size for me. And I listened to the quiet, and I thought, this is what comfort actually feels like. Not the absence of difficulty, not the padding of money around every sharp edge of life. Just this. Your own house, your own morning, your own life, finally, unapologetically yours. I did the right thing. I know that now. And if you are sitting somewhere right now, reading this, wondering whether you are allowed to do the same, I want you to hear me when I say, you are. You have worked too hard and loved too well and given too much to spend your last good years being convenient. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be seen.